Hi, my name is Dave Lannom with Monroe Training, and welcome to today's segment on the laws of electricity. So let's do a quick overview. We'll start out with why we're here, and then we're going to go through Ohm's law, Watt's law, Kirchhoffs law, and review. Wow, that's a lot of laws, Lanham. Well, in any automotive technology school, weeks or possibly months could be used to explain, calculate, and prove electrical theory. This module will help you understand and or just review these concepts in very, very simple terms. When we understand the scientific laws of electricity, it'll allow you to quickly and easily identify circuit faults. Remember, electricity cannot be seen, but the work that's being performed can be. And by understanding electrical laws, it'll help you visualize the function and or the fault in the circuit. Electrical laws are really a gateway to move from electrical circuitry to solid state electronic diagnosis. Visualizing faults leads to a faster, confident, and more accurate diagnosis. And remember, can't say it enough time, when you have a confident, accurate diagnosis of a vehicle's issues, it improves guest confidence. And when you have guest confidence, it leads to referral of friends, family, guests, and the guest coworkers. So let's go through the laws. Remember, we talked about Ohm's law a little bit in basic electricity, so let's do a quick review. What Ohm's law basically said was the voltage was always going to be equal to the resistance measured in ohms times the current measured in amps. And in the same way, the resistance measured in ohms was going to equal to the voltage divided by the amps. And the amps, the current flow measured in amps, was equal to the voltage divided by the resistance measured in ohms. Remember, we compared it to electricity, where voltage was the pressure that could be pushed into the circuit. We measured that in volts. From there, we had amperage, which was a measure of the flow of electrons. The more the restriction, the lower the flow. And again, we measured that in amps. In the same way, the opposition to current flow, or the restriction, is resistance, and we measured the resistance in ohms. The less resistance we had, the more flow, the more resistance we had, the less flow. When we put it all together, it was the voltage pushing the current measured in amps and the resistance measured in ohms, trying to prevent that from happening. Ohm's law is simple with voltage being the same. It was basically a teeter totter. As resistance went down, current went up. And inversely, if resistance went up, current went down. So I know if I blew a fuse because it had too much current, it blew the fuse because it had too little resistance, not too much. So let's talk about Watt's law. What? No, not what? Watts. Watt's law basically came in the same way. It said that the power, in other words, the amount of work that was being performed measured in watts, was equal to the voltage multiplied by the current measured in amps. So at that particular point, the power was equal to the current multiplied by the voltage. The current would always be equal to the power divided by the voltage. And the voltage was always equal to the power divided by the current. Why is that so important? Because when you start to measure the amount of work that's being performed, or power, it becomes extremely important, especially when you're dealing with electric vehicles, because 1 horsepower is basically the equivalent of 746 watts. So, what's the real question? How can we make a bulb shine brighter or a motor spin faster? And the answer is more power. And how can I do that? I can do that by either pushing more current through a circuit or more voltage. It's the difference between more current being regulated by electronics or more voltage being regulated by adding more resistance. But either way, we chose to do it. Kirchhoff's law was always going to come into play. Now, we could use a lot of words for Kirchhoff's law with sums and zeros. I forget it. Keep it simple. What Kirchhoff said was all the voltage that enters circuit gets used by the circuit, and all the current that enters a circuit gets used by the circuit. Why is that so important? Because I know if I measure 13.8 volts at an alternator and I measure only 12.8 volts at the battery, that I know between those 2 points, we lost that voltage and I can measure that voltage. And when we measured it in voltage drops. So what's the summary? The summary is this. While we can't see electricity, its behavior is purely predictable and it's based on scientific laws. But with all the laws, we've got to keep it simple. Ohm's law, simply stated, is resistance decreases, current increases, and vice versa. Watt's law said the higher the voltage, the higher the wattage. Electricity. Or with electronics, remember, the higher the current, the higher the wattage. So remember, 746 watts, you got yourself a horsepower. And you can't leave out Kirchhoffs law because Kirchhoffs law said simply this: all the voltage that entered the circuit got used by the circuit. So if I put 12 volts in and I'm only measuring 10 volts at the load, those other 2 volts are being used. We just have to find it. And in the same way, all the current that entered into a circuit got used by that circuit. Now, we're going to be applying these laws more heavily as we enter into a world of electronics. Look forward to seeing you in the next module on transistors. Hope this module has been helpful for you. Thank you. Have a great day.